In our headlines on this Thursday, July 30th, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung is in Chile, where efforts to future-proof South Korea's trade and supply chains will take center stage during summit talks with his counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve decides to maintain its benchmark interest rate in the range of 3.5 to 3.75% for the fifth policy session in a row, in response to rebounding oil prices amid renewed tensions in the Middle East. And speaking of those tensions, the U.S. military hits dozens of Iranian targets over a 2-hour span on Wednesday, following Donald Trump's earlier warning to hit Iran, quote, very hard for its targeting of American soldiers in the Middle East the day prior. We start in Santiago today, where President Lee Jae-myung is scheduled to sit down with his counterpart Jose Antonio Kast to touch upon broader economic partnership. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Having wrapped up his state visit to Brazil, President Lee Jae-myung has landed in Chile, the second leg of his three-nation trip to South America. Meeting the Korean community on Wednesday, President Lee highlighted Korea's ties with Chile.
양국 국민이 더 깊은 신뢰와 우정의 마음을 나누는 한-칠레 관계의 새로운 미래를 목격하고 있습니다. 핵심 강물, 청정에너지, 디지털과 인공지능, 과학기술과 문화에 이르기까지 양국 간의 협력의 지평은 점차 더 넓어지고 있습니다.
The next day, he will lay a wreath at the monument for Bernardo O'Higgins, honored as one of the nation's founding fathers. President Lee will go to the presidential palace on Thursday to meet with his Chilean counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast, who took office in March. The leaders will attend an official welcoming ceremony, expanded talks, an exchange of MOUs, a joint press conference, and lunch. Their key focus is modernizing the Korea-Chile Free Trade Agreement, which hasn't been updated since it went into effect in 2004 to reflect new areas, including digital trade and environmental cooperation.
We expect to dramatically increase trade with the South American countries and support our companies making inroads into the regional market.
South Korea also looks to expand cooperation in critical minerals, energy, and food. Chile is one of the major producers of copper and lithium.
We plan to strengthen our strategic partnership related to critical mineral supply chains and deepen discussions on diversifying sources of food and energy imports.
Also on the agenda is cooperation for the UN Ocean Conference set to be co-hosted in 2028 by South Korea and Chile. After concluding the summit, Lee will attend a Korea-Chile business roundtable. The South Korean president's trip to the key economic power in South America takes place as the country looks to expand its diplomatic horizons to the global south. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Santiago.
And while we await details of the upcoming discussions between the leaders of South Korea and Chile, the latter's ambassador here to Seoul believes this latest interaction will push bilateral ties to a new level. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young shares this belief.
A new big bang in Korea-Chile relations. That is the potential that Chile's top diplomat sees in President Lee Jae-myung's visit this week, from political to economic cooperation.
The free trade agreement was a big bang 22 years ago. I think we need to have a new big bang in the relationships, and I think the visit of the president of Korea next week to Chile will do that. No, will push the relationship between Chile and Korea to a next step, to a new level.
The deal helped raise bilateral trade from around $1.6 billion in 2004 to more than $7 billion last year. Chile is the world's largest copper producer and second largest lithium producer. Korea's strengths lie in advanced manufacturing, including batteries, electric vehicles, and semiconductors.
So want now to Korea also to participate in the lithium ecosystem, to add value to bring technologies into the exploration and exploitation of lithium and other critical minerals in Chile. So that's the big challenge for both countries. How do we jump from a buying-selling dynamic to something much bigger, much broader?
Yi's visit could provide political momentum for the next stage.
We are looking to new areas. We are looking about artificial intelligence, about cultural industries. We want also to have cooperation on infrastructure, critical minerals. So the business delegation that will come with President Yi to Chile exactly points to those areas. So we were looking forward to good discussions between governments and also between the business sectors of both countries.
The partnership also carries wider strategic significance for two trade-dependent middle powers facing rising protectionism. The two countries coordinate through platforms like the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement. Chile also supports Korea's bids to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and become an associate member of the Pacific Alliance.
Chile and Korea have a long story of shared values regarding multilateral trade system, the importance of rules in trade, the importance of rule in multilateralism in general, the importance of regional cooperation. And we are working also very closely together to try to protect the multilateral system. And protectionism can only be fought with more open trade.
The ambassador hopes to see the relationship continue to expand outside official diplomacy.
So it's a good way to discuss how, in this new approach of the relationship between Chile and Korea, both countries should work together. And when I say countries, I mean governments, private sector, universities, and people.
Yi's two-day visit is the first by a Korean president since Park Geun-hye travelled to Chile in 2015. It will also be his first meeting with President Jose Antonio Kast, who took office in March. Seung, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., the Federal Reserve has opted to keep its key interest rate steady as policymakers wait for tangible signs that inflation is indeed under control. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight meeting, choosing to wait for more clarity on inflation and the broader economic outlook despite renewed pressure from President Donald Trump to cut borrowing costs. At the end of its two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the Fed voted 9-3 to keep its benchmark interest rate at a range of 3.5 to 3.75%. The decision leaves the interest rate gap between South Korea and the United States at as much as 1 percentage point.
Today, as you know, our committee decided to vote by a 9-3 vote to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75%.
Speaking after the meeting, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh said the central bank remains firmly committed to its 2% inflation target, while describing the U.S. economy as showing impressive resilience despite recent shocks, including renewed fighting in the Iran war. Warsh acknowledged that inflation remains above the Fed's target and said policymakers will continue to monitor incoming data carefully.
Broadly, if you said to me standing in front of you, I abide fully by the strategy document, we're going to deliver 2% inflation and not a whisper more. But to achieve that, I'm looking at a broader set of inflation data than PCE.
Asked whether another rate hike would be the best response if inflation stays elevated, he said higher rates could be part of the solution, but stressed that any decision would be based on a broad assessment of economic conditions rather than inflation alone. The decision comes days after President Trump once again urged the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, arguing that the United States should have the lowest interest rate in the world to support economic growth. When asked about the Fed's decision on Wednesday, Trump praised Warsh as fantastic, brilliant, and smart, while reiterating that he would still like to see lower interest rates in the months ahead. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, hopes of easing tensions between Washington and Tehran are fading fast as the two sides engage in fresh fire, with the U.S. military hitting dozens of Iranian targets. Our Chong Hye-rim has the latest.
The U.S. military has launched a new round of strikes against Iran. U.S. Central Command announced that the operation began at 8 p.m. Wednesday Eastern Time, describing it as a powerful response to Iran's attempted attacks on American forces in the Middle East a day earlier. Explosions were heard in several locations across southern Iran. The strikes came after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to hit Iran very hard, following Tehran's launch of ballistic missiles at American forces stationed in Jordan.
In the meantime, we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had fired several ballistic missiles at a U.S. airbase and a military center in Jordan. The U.S. military described it as an attempted surprise attack, saying all incoming missiles were intercepted. Jordan's military also said it intercepted 5 missiles launched from Iran. Following a brief lull, the resumption of attacks from both sides has derailed diplomatic momentum, casting serious doubt on efforts to revive the ceasefire. Meanwhile, a suspected drone strike hit a U.S.-owned gas storage tanker at Egypt's Mediterranean port of Damietta. Maritime security firms said the attack struck the Energos Winter, sparking a fire that spread to another vessel. Egypt's petroleum ministry confirmed fires aboard 2 ships but did not identify the cause. It said the flames were brought under control and that no injuries or fatalities were reported. Responsibility for the suspected strike remains unclear. 정혜림, Arirang News.
And U.S. crude oil stockpiles have plunged to levels not seen in 4 decades as refineries ramp up production amid tensions in the Middle East. As of July 24th, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve had fallen to its lowest level in 43 years, dropping by 3.8 million barrels to around 307 million. The fall comes as American refineries operate at up to 100% capacity to export fuel to markets in Europe and Asia. The surge in shipments overseas appears to be driven by suppliers capitalizing on recent oil price hikes for higher profit margins. Meanwhile, in Japan, authorities say 28 people have lost their lives to the deadly earthquake that struck the country earlier this week. Priority has reportedly been placed on seeking survivors under the debris of damaged buildings, including a shopping mall in Kumamoto Prefecture. First responders have described the rescue operations as a race against time. Meanwhile, emergency repairs have been completed at major ports to deliver drinking water and transport relief supplies as some 10,000 residents remain displaced at hundreds of shelters across the prefecture. A major political showdown is unfolding at the National Assembly as the ruling party seeks to push ahead with sweeping judicial reforms while the opposition vows an all-night battle to block them. I have our political correspondent An Sung-jin standing by live on the line. Sung-jin, welcome. So what's the latest there?
Right. Good afternoon, Sunny. The plenary session was already once delayed from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. and only began a little past 3 p.m. It began by electing the Gender Equality Committee chair, which now completes the entire formation of the parliamentary committees. In the plenary session, lawmakers also passed a special counsel bill to investigate the recent ballot paper shortage during local elections through bipartisan agreement. Leadership from the 2 main political parties reached a final agreement this morning on the composition of the special counsel team, as well as the investigation's key areas of focus and jurisdiction. Alongside this bill, the ruling Democratic Party was set to push through a major judicial reform bill. However, the main opposition People Power Party launched a filibuster at around 4 p.m., arguing that there should be a bipartisan agreement on solutions to safeguard victims and prevent investigative gaps. The proposed bill is to amend the Criminal Procedure Act by stripping prosecutors of their authority to conduct supplementary investigations. Instead, the police would be required to carry out additional investigations requested by prosecutors within 1 month, and victims would gain stronger rights to challenge police decisions, a measure aimed at softening the impact of removing prosecutors' investigative powers. Now, despite the PPP's opposition, under parliamentary rules, a filibuster can be ended after 24 hours with the support of 3/5 of lawmakers. With backing from smaller allied parties, the ruling party is expected to have enough votes to cut short the debate and pass the bill, completing the final step in its judicial reform agenda. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Sung-jin, thank you for that coverage on the confrontation at the Parliament. Moving forward, Microsoft and Meta have both beaten earnings expectations, but their gains tell different AI stories, thus prompting contrasting investor response. Our Kim Bo-kyung explains.
Major hyperscalers Microsoft and Meta reported their fiscal fourth quarter 2026 results. That is for between April and June after market close on Wednesday. Both companies beat the market's revenue expectations, but differences in AI monetization and profitability triggered sharply contrasting market reactions. Microsoft reported revenue of $90 billion, up 18% from a year earlier, surpassing market expectations of $87 billion. Net income rose 31% on-year to $35.77 billion, while adjusted earnings per share, or EPS, came in at $4.74, beating the market forecast. Due to ballooning investment in AI infrastructure, free cash flow fell 23% on-year to $19.64 billion, but it exceeded Wall Street's estimate of a little more than $13 billion, showing that the company's AI investments were indeed translating into profits. This was mainly driven by its cloud business, Azure, surpassing $100 billion in annual revenue for the first time, and the company's AI productivity tool, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which had more than 30 million subscribers. Meta, meanwhile, posted revenue of $60.80 billion, which slightly beat analysts' expectations of $60.22 billion. Yet both operating and net income fell after spending on AI infrastructure jumped more than 55% from a year earlier. Free cash flow plunged more than 90% on year to $780 million as capital expenditures surged. This weakened investor sentiment, leading Meta shares to drop nearly 10% in after-hours trading.
Meta platforms faced pressure from below consensus revenue guidance and slower ad impression growth, while Microsoft rallied on stronger forward guidance, rapid growth in paid 365 Copilot users, and lower capital spending plans. These differences made two stock shares diverge.
When it comes to the outlook for South Korean chip makers SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics, the expert says continued AI spending by major tech companies should support demand for semiconductors. The key question, however, is how long this momentum can be sustained. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Here at home, Samsung Electronics is reaping the rewards of the global race to build AI infrastructure as the chipmaker logs its highest ever quarterly operating profit. Our Kim Jun-hong has the numbers.
Samsung Electronics on Thursday said its second quarter operating profit rose more than 1,800% from a year earlier to 89.5 trillion won, or approximately $62.1 billion. Sales increased 130% to 171.5 trillion won. This marked the third consecutive quarter of record operating profit and revenue. Detailed earnings released Thursday showed semiconductors once again led the company's performance, accounting for 99% of total operating profit. Its chip division, Device Solutions, posted 89.2 trillion won in operating profit, marking another record quarterly performance. Memory chips accounted for nearly all of the division's 127.5 trillion won in sales. A global race to invest in AI data centers kept memory chips in short supply, which drove prices higher.
Samsung is generating strong profits by ramping up HBM production. Since HBM uses multiple layers of DRAM, it leaves less capacity for conventional DRAM and further tightens supply. That drives up conventional memory prices as well, creating a double benefit to earnings.
The tech giant invested a record 16 trillion won in research and development to strengthen its technology leadership. The company expects demand from agentic AI and expanding HBM4E sales to support earnings in the second half. Experts also say much of the HBM supply has already been committed under long-term contracts, which would help sustain earnings in the second half. Yet the mobile and home appliance business posted its first-ever operating loss. The Device Experience division lost 800 billion won as higher memory prices pushed up production costs. Samsung also announced plans to begin construction of its second chip manufacturing facility in Taylor, Texas later this year, with the aim to start mass production in 2030. The company added that it has secured contracts with all 5 major global data center customers and finalized negotiations on additional long-term supply agreements. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
And business sentiment within the local manufacturing industry has hit its highest level in over 4 years. According to the Bank of Korea on this Thursday, the Manufacturing Composite Business Sentiment Index stood at 103.2 this July to mark the 4th straight monthly increase since April. A reading above 100 indicates optimism, while a reading below signals pessimism. Bank officials are linking the positive sentiment to booming business for chips and ships. In other news, North Korea-linked cyber operations stole over $600 million in the first half of this year, driving a record surge in cryptocurrency exploits worldwide. Now, this is according to a new security report by on-chain security platform Blockade. North Korea-related attacks accounted for 55% of all such incidents during the first 6 months of 2026. Globally, attackers drained $1.1 billion across 212 verified incidents in the same period. The Grammy's first Asian Pop Award was expected to be BTS's moment, but the group says it's chosen to sit out the race, reigniting debate over whether the new award seeks to recognize or to separate. Our Park Chae-ryung files this report.
BTS seems closer to winning a Grammy Award than ever before, as the group topped the Billboard 200 for 2 consecutive weeks and sold out shows worldwide. But the group has made a sudden announcement that it won't submit any of its music for Grammy consideration. For the first time, BTS has voluntarily stepped out of the race. On Wednesday, all 7 BTS members simultaneously share the same message on their social media accounts, saying music should be heard and loved for what it is, rather than divided by region or language. They did not explicitly mention the Grammy's newly created Best Asian Pop Music Performance category. Still, their posts have been widely seen as an apparent protest against the Grammy's decision to create an award based on region and language. The Recording Academy that oversees the Grammy Awards recently introduced the Best Asian Pop Music Performance category for next year's ceremony. It covers music, including K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop, that originated in or is widely recognized across Asian markets. Eligible songs must make meaningful use of at least one Asian language. It means tracks performed entirely in English do not qualify for the category. Critics argue that it could push artists already competing in the global pop market into a separate lane labeled Asian music. Unlike categories such as rock, pop, or R&B, Asian refers to a region rather than a music genre, while eligibility also depends on the language used in a song. At the heart of the debate is whether the new award represents greater inclusion or simply separates Asian artists from the Grammy's mainstream categories. Recording Academy CEO Harvey Mason Jr. rejected such claims. He said the goal is to give more artists greater visibility and recognition. The Academy also stressed that artists can be submitted and nominated in both the new category and the Grammy's general fields. Park Chae-ryung, Arirang News.
And the 48th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee has come to an end in Busan after an 11-day agenda. Delegates reviewed the conservation status of 148 properties and added 25 new sites to the World Heritage list, bringing the global total to 1,273. South Korea also secured an expansion of the Ketbal Korean tidal flats, adding tidal flats in Seosan, Yeosu, Kohung, and Muan. The K-Heritage House attracted more than 137,000 guests over 10 days, while its merchandise store generated over 280 million Korean won, or some $193,000 in sales.
Heatwave warnings and advisories cover most of the country now. Earlier today, Yangsan in Gyeongsangnam-do province climbed above 40 degrees Celsius. The heat will also linger overnight, bringing another round of tropical nights to many areas. The national average number of tropical nights is now the highest on record. Seoul has now gone through 8 in a row, while Jeju Island has seen 23. And tomorrow the sun will be just as intense. UV levels will range from high to very high. Ozone levels will also be high enough to affect air quality across parts of central regions, including Seoul and the southern regions. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 26 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon 25 and Jeju 27 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 34 degrees, Daegu will be at 37 degrees, Gyeongju at 38 degrees. Looking ahead, the heat wave is only going to intensify, so be sure to stay hydrated and take care in the heat. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at the hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us.